Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about as the blood cells move through your capillaries. The main point of the cardiovascular system is to feed the cells, right? So it's going to be, picking up the oxygen from your lungs and feeding the cells, nutrients from your digestive system, and it's also going to be removing nitrogenous waste, as we talked about before. So on the arterial side, as it comes in, of course, it's under pressure, but as it reaches the cells or the place where the fusion is actually going to take place, it's kind of neutral. And then the inward flow towards the heart is going to be low pressure, which basically maintains the gradient from high to low pressure for the blood movement. So the blood movement is going to be in this direction. But right here at the cells, then we have the ability of the materials to flow or to diffuse easily into the interstitial fluid, which we talked about before in excretion. That's the fluid that is between cells, and then into the cells directly. So diffusion is across that interstitial fluid. Okay, the other thing to talk about is blood pressure. Blood pressure, we're going to talk about how it's going to be measured. But blood pressure, of course, is the highest in the ventricular systolic. But what we usually do to measure blood pressure is we measure it sort of in the peripheral arterioles, all right? So in the arm, usually. And what they're doing is, so the blood would be flowing into here and then, of course, back. What happens is they squeeze off the blood vessel so that there's no sound of the blood coming through at all. And then the blood pressure, the cuff will kind of relax and let some of that pressure off. And you measure so the top number is the squeeze number. In other words, like what number it takes to squeeze it off to stop it from flowing. And then as you let the the pressure cuff come off, then what you do is you listen for the sound where it first starts coming through the vessel, and that is your low number. All right, so blood pressure is measured by, how much force it takes to shut it off, and then when it first starts coming back in. Typically, it's 120 over 70 pounds of pressure. Okay. Now, another thing to look at is the blood cells. So I believe we talked about this a little bit in Core 1, but just to sort of go over this a little bit. So let me just try to get this in focus. All right, so first of all, the contents of the blood are mainly water, ions of various types like sodium, potassium, calcium, etc. Plasma, which is, mostly a lot of proteins and immunoglobulins, which have to do with your defense and osmotic balance things, pH, hydrogen ions, etc., clotting factors, other things. And then we also have to look at what the different blood vessels are. So blood cells are. So let's just look at what's happening over here. First of all, the different types of cells that are found floating in the plasma. So the plasma is about 60%, and the cell types that are listed right here are about 40% of the blood. So erythrocytes or red blood cells are by far the most predominant. These cells do not have a nucleus, so they would die after a little while. I think it's somewhere on the order of a couple of months, a month or two. And so that they are have hemoglobin in them. They're the ones that are picking up the oxygen and carbon dioxide and distributing in or out. The other types of cells, and these are fairly large and they do have a nucleus, are white blood cells or leukocytes. These leukocytes have a nucleus and stain, and they have an unusual looking nucleus. So they are given their specific names based on what their nucleus looks like. And then the platelets, which are little pieces of cell, and these are for blood clotting. They have a clotting factor on them, but basically they're like little pieces that would push up against a break in a vessel and sort of make like a a barrier for the blood, so it doesn't go out of the body. All right, let's look at the white blood cells a little better. So if I looked at the formation of blood or differentiation of different blood cells, if I had a stem cell, so this is be a cell that is going to produce either lymphocytes, or they're going to produce blood cells. These cells, of course, are found in your bone marrow, and they will be differentiating into these different types of cells, losing the nucleus and having hemoglobin, being cell parts, being the white blood cell sorts of cells. Okay. Another thing to know is that it's not really part of the cardiovascular system per se, but it's associated with it, and that's the lymphatic system. And when we were talking about digestion, we were talking about how the lymph luteal is picking up fats, but it's also important in distribution of the things that help your body immune system support. And these things are going to start in your cells, and they drain back. And you notice that it looks a lot like the cardiovascular system's system. It has small vessels, larger and then larger, and they are interspersed with the capillaries. So they would be able to pick up materials from the cells or deliver materials to the cells to help with defense. And there are nodes, of course, along them, lymph nodes. You probably heard of those before. And these are helping either store or produce things that are used in defense. And the exit, ultimately, for those items into your bloodstream, from the lymph system into your bloodstream, is going to be up here at the top of your heart in your arteries. And it will then be dumped into there and able to be distributed around your body, say, for example, if you had an infection or you were fighting something off.